is up, hotties? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ashton. Today, we are taking a look at some more NFL draft prospects, and with the Combine well underway, it is the perfect time to discuss running backs because they are putting on their Combine performances as we speak. We're recording this episode today, on Saturday, which is when these running backs are doing their Combine shenanigans. So it should be a good time to discuss them, I would think. So, Matt, I appreciate you picking running backs. You did a wonderful job. But before we get into it, how are you guys doing on this beautiful Saturday evening? 5 o'clock on a Saturday. I was going to try and do something funny, but I won't. Theo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Obviously, I've been watching the Combine. It's been kind of a funny last 30 minutes at the Combine with Rappaport tweeting out that Will Howard could be a potential first-round pick, followed immediately by him getting booed every time he steps up to throw in Indianapolis and missing routes on air.
Yeah.
So my timeline is all of a sudden filled with Will Howard dialogue as we press record on this episode.
Did you see the recent quote that he had on what he wanted to show at the Combine?
No, I did not see that.
Oh, dude, I just lost it. It was something along the lines of like, oh, I want to show my accuracy. I want to show my velocity on these throws, but I also want to put some ass into it. And I have no idea what he meant by that.
Probably some velocity, like he's going to unlock his hips and generate some torque. And
this was like, I saw it like right after he ran the 40. I'm like, is he just mean like he's running? Like, I don't know.
I don't know what that means either. Exactly. I saw Isaiah Bond say that he was going to run a 4.1 and then he ran a 4.4. That
4.4 is still a good time.
They booed him there too. You got an angry mob in the crowd of this Combine.
It's not looking good for fans at the Combine going forward.
No, it's not. Here's the thing, though. We should know that him running a 4.4 instead of a 4.1 actually raises his draft stock.
I know. He doesn't want to run a... Although Xavier Worthy's Super Bowl performance may have put my 4.2 slander to bed.
Maybe the take is, if you don't break the record, but you run a 4.2, then you're going to be bad.
We're hanging by a thread. Our theories.
Yeah, we're starting to get down to it. If we got to come up with unless
you can run a 4.2 if it's really fast, but if it's just a slow 4.2, that doesn't even exist. What else happened at the Combine today before we get into the running backs? Or really the whole Combine. We haven't recorded, I think, since the drills started.
Yeah, we can obviously talk about who is the safety that was a 10.0 RAS and would also be a 10.0 RAS at cornerback, would be a 9.87 at linebacker, and I think also a 10.0 at wide receiver. Was that Nick Harris?
Nick Malloy, yeah.
Nick,
for
yes.
Carolina.
Yes.
He's very good.
Yeah, he's really good.
And it's weird that he's been kind of slept on for this whole process. I should have talked about him some before.
I feel the same way. I just did a Luther Burden. I just did a Luther Burden review, and during the South Carolina game that I watched, there was one guy who brought him down on first contact every single time, and everybody else was missing tackles. And it was how do you pronounce his last name exactly, Matt?
I think it's Emawari. I could be wrong.
Emawari. I think that's right too. That sounds right. But he was tackling Luther Burden, like stopping him stone cold, like driving down on an out route, which is very hard to do against Burden. So as a guy coming downhill and making tackles, he is very legit, at least. I haven't done a full review of his game yet, but he's impressed me in other games that I've watched.
6'3", 220, 4.38 in the 40, a 43-inch vert, an 11.6 broad jump. I mean, I would draft him just based on that alone.
Put him in nickel, man. He moves like that, and he can tackle. Like, I'll put him as my overhang and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
But I still stand by the Combine does not matter that much. And here's the new fold to that take. And you shouldn't be eliminating guys because of their Combine performance.
I kind of agree. I think one that's interesting is Tez Johnson, who weighed in at 155, and he ran a 4.540. How is it even possible? And I think a lot of people will eliminate them from their boards for that. Like that just, those just aren't athletic thresholds that you want as a wide receiver. But when we watched him at the Senior Bowl, I think he torched every corner there.
He's awesome.
He looks like the best wide receiver there.
Look, there's definitely like big limitations with his game, but I promise you, like once you get into like the late third round, it's like, dude, who do you think is out there? Like, what type of guys do you think are in the third round of the draft? That's what kills me about it. Maybe you can be negative about a guy. I think the Panthers are doing this, and that's why I'm so frustrated about this year, where it's like people just like take players off their board way too easily, and then they whittle down their board so much where it's like tough to have, you know, a good draft when you're being that selective. You got to be able to work with multiple types of guys. So I still think he's going to be a good player. You know, I'm not picking him in the first round or anything, but I don't really buy that he's particularly slow. I think people get too, like if he ran because it got cut down to like a 4.51, and I saw something that said like, oh, they like him and Isaiah Bond like rocked early and set off the 40 time like laser thing or whatever, and they're actually faster than that, and that's how Isaiah Bond was able to have like the second fastest mile per hour, but still run like a really slow 40. I just think like a tenth of a second too slow. If that really changes your mind, I honestly, the weight's more concerning, but I'm just not thinking that hard about this stuff.
There's a lot of reasons for why a 40 time could go a certain way. I mean, you've got two shots at it, and it's effectively like boom or bust for a lot of people in some cases. I'm looking at his ESPN page, Tez Johnson, and apparently this season he was 5'10", 165. So it seems like he dropped 10 pounds to run this. Now, Matt, I don't know if what you're like about him potentially wobbling out of the start and like setting off the timer early or something. That could be the case. The first thing that came to my mind was like when I was like training in track, my coach always told me about like an optimal running weight. And like some guys have an optimal running weight at like 170. Some guys have an optimal weight at 190. Like it's different for everyone. And like him losing 10 pounds might have actually made him too light. Like he might have been faster at 165 and thought he would have been faster at 155. So like that's also
it's also
a
hard to
possibility.
trust those college weights.
It is.
To that
it is
level.
hard to trust that. It is hard to trust that. So you never really know. But that's the thing. Like the tape matters more than like the 40 time at the combine.
Yeah, I mean, he was at Troy to begin his college career and then transferred to Oregon, 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns off the bat there at Oregon, and then 910 touchdowns this year. So he's been plenty productive. He looked great at the Senior Bowl, and he just tested terrible. And I still think that you could buy the dip on him and look smart in a couple months here. But I think in general, it's kind of nice to look at their drills too, which don't actually get timed or put anywhere. But sometimes when you just watch them run their 40 and jump and, you know, run the bag drills and run the hoop or throw or whatever it is, once you kind of watch that and get kind of this full sense of them working out, you can kind of ascertain like who the best athletes are there. And I do think that that's important, separating some things and, you know, giving you a good idea of who you kind of want to revisit or look at on tape. I think as a whole, like, I think about my time playing soccer, all right, when I was like in middle school and a freshman, right? If we were to do a combine with all of us there, I would bet that the best soccer player on my team would have like killed the agility drills and like killed the, and I would have probably sucked, but I guess you could have seen that on tape, right? But I don't know. I think it does give you a sense of who the best athletes are, obviously, and that does matter in athletics, but eliminating people based on times and
You would have been
ignoring
off my board before the combine. Big
yeah,
dog.
exactly. Yeah, I'm kind of sputtering as I give this analogy.
I'm messing with you. I know what you mean. I know what you mean, like especially at
way.
like the high school or middle school level. It just feels like there's like the best player is just like good at stuff, like good at everything. Just like sort of there's a natural feel to it. I do think that shows up on the tape. I don't like to pay too much attention to the combine. I'm honestly a little disappointed that all of like my favorites are putting up good RAS scores. It's more fun when they put up bad ones and you get to go to bat for them than it is when they put up good ones and everyone's on board.
Yeah, true.
It's more fun to try to be different.
Fannin, I like Fannin still, and he put up terrible numbers, and he's
just a weird
He
player.
tried to block the blocking sled and didn't push it in a straight line. He like veered off to the side. So we
sealed it off.
We can go to exactly. He was sealing a lane for the running back. So we can go to bat for Fannin, which I will do, by the way. All right, great after the catch, really nuanced technical route runner. Great hands, soft hands, catches everything. Like, I don't care that he is a slot weapon. I think that he's pretty interesting. I mean, Jonnu Smith was probably a top 10 tight end in football this year. So why can't Fannin step in and be good? And what's Kelsey doing at the combine these days?
Right. I would love to. Well, no, they used to do that. That used to be a thing. Do you remember this?
Oh, the vet combine. I do remember the vet combine.
Oh man.
Who is that guy who ran
It was some Bears dude. It wasn't like Mike Davis, but it was like
Mike Davis.
Nah, I don't think it was Mike. This was way before Davis's old age. Do you remember this, Blaiden?
I have no idea what you're talking about, but
there used to be, it happened like one time maybe. There used to be a veteran combine where like the vets who were free agents would go and work out. But then like I think one of or multiple of the older running backs ran like horrific 40 times. And then it never happened again because it hurt everyone's stock to see the actual numbers.
Michael Bush is the guy.
Michael Bush.
And then there's another headline that I'm reading here. Michael Sam was flat out horrible at veteran combine, and that quote is from his agent. They need to bring this back, just like washed players coming in
Michael
and realizing that they're washed.
Oh, dude,
Michael Bush's raw response to learning. And then, okay, he said, "You got to be fucking kidding me." When he ran a 4.91, there you go. There goes my career. Oh, that sucks.
He said after that, he said, "There you go. There goes my career."
A 4.91 as an NFL athlete is.
And then he said, "Put it like this: you sign me, you're going to get an angry, pissed off football player who wants some respect."
That sucks, dude.
Yeah, well, you're also getting a guy who runs a 4.9. And you're a running back.
Oh, man. Well,
you guys want to get into some running backs?
Speaking of running backs who didn't run a 4.9, yeah.
Well, so the way we've been kind of going about these prospects is we've been going through the grinding the mocks list, but if you looked at that, you know that there's only two guys on. So we're just gonna kind of go through a list here that I've kind of conjured up out of nowhere, and I think we should start with Ashton Jeanty. I guess consensus RB1.
And I assume I just have a top 5 running backs list for me personally. Okay. And I assume that he's number 1 on all of our boards. I'm gonna take that grand leap. I guess my question before we get into the discussion about his skill set is just how high would you take a running back like him?
I would take him number 2 overall if I were Cleveland.
Oh,
I'd be like if they were like, you know what, we want to commit. I've said this before. If they wanted to like, you know, go all in, replace Nick Chubb, like get a really great running back and commit to being a run first offense again. Hell yeah, I would take Jeanty. I could get excited about that. Wouldn't be my first choice of a pick, but I would be okay with it.
Who would be your first choice? It would be like Carter.
Carter and Hunter are like kind of A1, A2 for me.
Yeah.
Or 1A, 1B. And then after that, probably Graham and then Jeanty.
Okay. So you'd take him top 5. Like, just kind of generally.
I would take him top 5 pretty easily.
I stand by that.
Yeah.
That's a good analysis. I would personally not take him over a couple of the other top guys because I do think positional value still holds some weight. But if you see like a team taking him at 4 or 5 or 6, or I mean, it's probably even going to be defending him if he gets taken at like 10, which seems more likely. I'm saying he's just so good. You're not going to be saying this 4 weeks into the season, I think. So I'm in his corner no matter what, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's kind of this prevailing thought, and Daniel Jeremiah spoke about it today, and I think it's true that like a running back is kind of the final piece of the puzzle, and ideally you want a running back behind an offensive line that's good, so you're not giving him touches that don't go anywhere. And I think that's true. Like, I think Saquon kind of proved that. Like, he didn't do too much 2 years ago in New York because the offensive line was terrible. Like, he wasn't very efficient. And then he goes to Philadelphia and he essentially wins them the Super Bowl. And I will say he wins them the Super Bowl. I mean, the amount of 60-yard rushes that he had, his overall ability and efficiency, it forces these defenses to commit bodies to the box. And in that Super Bowl, it was so obvious. Like, Hurts would see those blitzers coming from the slot. He'd change the play and he'd take shots down the field. Yeah. And it happened many times over the course of that Super Bowl. And it was Saquon's gravity that really helped it happen. And Hurts's, because those two combined with the read option game. And
I don't want to make this into like a Hurts meat writing segment, but
you can.
I do want to, at some point I want to make a TikTok on this too, but I figured out that like Jalen Hurts' biggest superpower is just what he's like is able to see and diagnose pre-snap.
Oh yeah, he was pre-snapping everything this playoffs.
And he's like, it's like what he can do to set up the blocking schemes, what he can do to like recognize like, oh, safety's about to rotate post snap. Oh, they're in quarters. Oh, they're in cover. Like, he's knowing all of this stuff and like he's changing the play accordingly. That is, I think, his biggest superpower. Like, other than like his physical strength, I think that's what makes him so dangerous right now.
And I think Saquon and Jeanty and any great running back helps you do that as a quarterback because you see more blitzes and you see more, sellouts to stop the back. And that just makes it easier for you as a QB. So I think trying to get this back on track of what I was talking about with Saquon and the Giants and the Eagles.
Yeah.
I understand that point, and I understand that a running back probably can't do much behind a bad offensive line, but you can't draft an entire offensive line with one pick,
I think, not to interrupt you, I think that's such like, not what you're saying, but the logic I think that's so dumb. I think that's it's so like, well, what just happened? Saquon Barkley went from a bad team to a good team. And then he went from like, being a good team or a good player on a bad team to a great player on a great team or like a great, you know what I mean, right? That can happen with any position. You just wouldn't ever like, you don't sit here and say, wide receiver's more of a final piece because look at Malik Neighbors. What? Like, he's just a good player on a bad team. Now, it's certainly true that to some extent our running back's production is dependent on the offensive line. Maybe more so than other positions. They're dependent on the rest of their team. And maybe that's why they don't have as much positional value. That take I can get behind. But I totally agree. You can't draft like a whole team with one pick. And you can't sit here and I know it's like we learn something every year. You can't try to learn that much through, it's a final piece. Well, it wasn't for like Tennessee. It wasn't for the Titans. It wasn't for the Browns. You can get these pieces in any order. That's like just way, way overthinking. If you got a top 10 pick, what order do we need to draft the positions in? Dude, who are the actual players in the draft? That's what's important here. And Jeanty is about as good as a running prospect as you could possibly be. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not like Saquon never helped the Giants win games. I mean, was their offensive line great in 2022 when he rushed for 1,300 yards and they made the playoffs and won a playoff game in large part thanks to the fact that he had a fantastic performance versus the Vikings? Like, he went off. yeah, that happened, and they were in the second round, and that was kind of just due to one player. Like, if they didn't have Saquon Barkley, that would not have taken place. All right, they would not have been in the playoffs if you replace Saquon Barkley with a league average player for that 2022 Giants team. So I'm with you guys on the. You can't really take Jeanty too high. I mean, if we're talking about the best overall players in this draft, I think Jeanty's at the very top, honestly, when you talk about strengths and weaknesses, and really the fact that he doesn't have any weaknesses. That is, it's him and Hunter who have the most well-rounded games, I feel, and that's why they were the two Heisman finalists over any quarterback. So, yeah, I think those two are the top two players on a big board, and I think Jeanty could really help out a team like, I don't know, New England, pair him with Drake May. I wouldn't be mad at that.
That's what I was thinking. I think that would get a lot of backlash early, but it's like, dude, I don't know. I can totally see it. Oh, yeah. Jeanty's just he just is so well rounded, man. He's got such a great game. When you have the chance to draft somebody who is like a superhero all the time, you should go get that guy and make defenses try to plan around it, you know? And Jeanty is that. His contact balance is ridiculous. And he pairs that with like being such a creative runner that it almost allows him to like flow through contact in a way where he does this thing, and I think we have a review up of that, unless it got striked.
I think that was a live stream, so it might have gotten.
We did at some point, and I just loved when we watched him, the fact that he would like go airborne more than almost anybody else to get up and allow the contact, instead of to like take his feet out from under him, to just push him up into the direction they're hitting him. And he's so like quick-witted, I guess is the term for it. Like, his vision is so great, and his IQ and his feel, whatever you want to do, that he can build off of that quickly and like change another direction and juke somebody out, because he's also got top tier elusiveness to go with it, and he's got great long speed. That's why he was hitting home runs all the time. So all of that blends together into a really good player. And as always, whenever we talk about running backs, if you've been listening, we worry a lot about guys who are talented but get too east-west. They're trying too hard. They're trying to get clips off instead of win ball games. Jeanty isn't that at all. I feel like he's got the perfect balance of knowing when he can make something big and knowing when to take what's there. And he's not only someone who can take what's there, but he can squeeze the juice out of the orange and get those last couple of yards. He's a great player.
Yeah, it feels like hitting him almost makes him more powerful. Like, it just injects a little bit more force into like his body when he takes on contact. It's like a little speed boost.
Can I turn into Colin Cowherd for a second again?
Go for it.
I compared him to a ball of vibranium.
I don't even know what that is.
It's the metal in Marvel where like if you shoot it or something, like it absorbs vibrations. And it's kind of the same thing, and you can use that to like attack or like repel it back at someone. That's kind of what Jeanty is. He just like absorbs contact. He's the only running back that I gave a 10 in any category. I gave him a 10 in contact balance. I gave him a 10 in vision. I gave him a 10 in agility / elusiveness. I'm just like, this guy just makes too many people miss all the time. He leads college football in missed tackles force. He leads college football in yards after like he's just so
and that's
good.
That's so ridiculous. I mean, those two things are almost opposed to each other. If you're making people miss sometimes, are you getting through contact always? It's tough, and he's done it he's been like that for years too. It wasn't like he just had some breakout year. I guess, I don't know. I really struggle to find the serious nitpick. I mean, there's guys who maybe are like, who are like a more prototypical like build. Like, I'm thinking like Adrian Peterson is like the absolute prototype, but I'm only saying that to think of a negative. I don't really care about like him being shorter.
What was Barry Sanders' height weight? I remember reading Bill Walsh's book, and he had his ideal player at each position. He like built his archetype, and every single position had an ideal height and an ideal weight except for running back. He said, I don't care. what size your running back is. And sometimes I think being smaller is better because you can kind of get lost behind the line of scrimmage, and your contact balance can be better because you're so low to the ground.
Right.
Like I after watching Aaron Jones for so many years, it's like he's small and I wouldn't change it. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. I've seen him like run under like two linemen will be blocking each other, and in the space like between them, I've seen him like maneuver through that space. And James Cook does that a lot too. It's like he gets so small that he could just fit through the tiniest possible gaps that Derrick Henry can't. Now, Derrick Henry has other ways to win, right? And that's why being big, being small, being medium, it doesn't really matter as long as you know what you're doing.
There's just so many different styles of running back. This is why running back is the most fun position to watch, I think.
It's cool.
It's outside of the fact that most of the footage you have to comb through has like 30% of them like jogging out for a check down that they don't get targeted on. But if you can get through that, I just like how stylistically different the running backs are and the ways that you can be. And I agree. I don't really care about height.
It is interesting in a draft class where like there's Caleb Johnson, 6'1", 224. There's RJ Harvey, who's 5'8", 205. And then you've got Jeanty, who's 5'9", like 215, 220. Like he's got both like the kind of small and stocky frame, and he's like got the home run speed. There really is no weakness, like you said, Matt. He's the total package.
And last year he had a 91.6 receiving grade on PFF. He had almost a perfect passer rating when he was targeted, and he played wide receiver in high school. He had 14 yards after catch per reception in 2023. Now this year he was hardly targeted. They were just handing him the ball 30 times a game, right? But he's got some receiving chops too. Like there really isn't a weakness to his game at all. I think it's all pretty high marks, and
he could come in and be a first team All-Pro player.
I think so. I think so. Mm-hmm. I think so. He is ridiculous, and I think you can take him top 5. I saw Marcus Mosher, the Cowboys fan, say like, I don't understand how you can take him at 12 when this running back class is so deep. It's like, bro, he's a first team All-Pro.
It's making me so mad. And you know what? He's not the only guy that I feel like that with. It's a deep running back class, yes. There is a difference between the second best guy and the 8th. There is. I'm sorry.
Especially when it is Jeanty. Like,
and to say that about Jeanty, where it's like, you know, there's a lot of solid back. There's only so many guys who are again superheroes and guys where the other team has to game plan around them specifically. To not see the value in that, or to just be worried about like, I just hate that whole view of draft analysis where you're trying to like game a mock draft simulator and squeeze the perfect value and just like check off as many boxes. Guess what? In 2 years, you're going to look back and not think about the draft like that at all. You're going to think about like who changed the game for teams and who were the biggest stars who made the biggest impacts. And you're not going to care about position, and you're not going to think about class depth in that same way.
I just don't understand how everybody, like, these people get burned by Gibbs, and I got burned by Gibbs in positional value, and
but how does that not? I did too.
And
how does it not change?
It's like, but then it just didn't matter. And I think like this was just 1 year, and maybe running back is a little bit less valuable than like edge or something like that. But it's really not that big of a deal to me anymore.
But here's the thing: what we learned is not, oh well, Gibbs ended up being good. It's that all that ended up really mattering was whether or not Gibbs was good. If Gibbs had been bad, everybody would have sat here and been like, see, it was wrong to draft a running back. But it wouldn't have been about them drafting a running back. It would have been about them drafting a bad player. That's what's important. Go look at any redraft that's done like 2 years later. And what do you see? You don't see people sitting around talking about like, oh, what was this team's biggest need at the time? Because they need to draft that. And you don't see people sitting around saying, oh, they're actually going to skip out on this guy or the best player who is available here because they could have waited longer to get one. You just don't think about that like that after the fact. You think about who are the best players, and then you take them. And there's some, of course, like if you have a quarterback, you're not going to take a quarterback even if you have the first overall pick and there's a guy there. But for the most part, you should just be trying to find good players and hit on them in a vacuum, and then worry about like building out the rest of the roster and filling the cracks later.
Yeah. No, you got to take guys high who can cover other weaknesses on your roster. And taking Jeanty makes your wide receivers better. It just makes life easier for them because they're not going to see as much safety support. So yeah, and Jeanty is just one of those guys and that changes the ecosystem of everything instead of being a jag. All right. And there are a lot of like good running backs, but they don't change the math like Jeanty would.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think there's in fact, I don't think there's any other running back in this class that we can safely say like day one, they're in the backfield. Teams are going to, change the math to try to guard them. And I think Jeanty will get that respect because look at what he just did. Like no one has done this in such a long time. Like there's a lot of good running backs in this class. Like I enjoyed watching the film of many of them, but they're not Jeanty and they didn't have Jeanty's season at all. And there's just absolutely no way that the Cowboys shouldn't sprint the card up if the best player in the draft at a position of need is there at 12.
And people keep it. That's such a Jerry Jones pick. It's like, bro, what are you talking about, man? It's like arguably the best player in the class at 13, and you need the position. And I mean, unless you're complimenting Jerry Jones, but I just don't think you really are.
He'll sell jerseys, because he's good.
He'll sell jerseys
want him 'cause he's selling
make the Hall of Fame, I
jerseys.
guess. Well, I don't know if he can make the Hall, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Hey, he might, man.
He might.
I'm not doubting that'll happen. It's just that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. Well, Jeanty's the consensus RB1, but it doesn't feel like there is a huge consensus at RB2 or beyond that. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I feel like most people have Hampton, but it's certainly not a consensus. And it's not a consensus on this pod because I don't have Hampton at RB2.
Okay. Where do you have him? Let's talk about Hampton.
Let's talk about Hampton. Well, I won't reveal where I have him yet, but I will.
Okay.
Why I don't have him at 2 is he just doesn't seem to have a lot of lateral quickness to me.
That's a trend I'm seeing with a lot of running backs in this class.
There's a lot of big bruisers in this one, I feel like, but
yeah.
Hampton is the biggest and the bruisiest, which is good in some ways, and I love how big and strong and powerful he is, but to some extent, he's almost too north and south. Like, I like guys who can, I don't want you to bounce it too much, okay? But I do think that you should be able to put your foot in the ground, and if there's nothing up the middle, you should be able to kind of bounce and get outside the block of your receiver, and most big plays happen up the sideline. And I think Hampton, as big as strong as he is, there are other guys in the class who can also break tackles and also have, good numbers after contact, but, have a little bit more juice to hit the big play as well. And I think that lateral agility and range behind the line of scrimmage with him is a bit lacking for me. But he's a beast, Matt. I know you like him, so I'll let you talk about the strengths here.
Well, first off, I totally agree with your weaknesses.
Yeah.
He is a rare guy where he is too north and south. He sometimes just likes to pick what he's going to do and just try to bang at it. Now, that's not necessarily always a bad thing, and he has ridiculous contact balance. Jeanty's is better than his, but I don't think they're not doing quite the same thing almost. Jeanty is flowing through it, whereas with Hampton, it's like guys are really bouncing off of him or he stays on his line a little bit more. And it's pretty ridiculous, I think. It's pretty special. It's starting to get into superpower range, I personally believe. The other thing that I like about him, I think he has great vision, and then he has the speed to finish these runs off. And when he gets going, it gets to a point where just the momentum he has with how strong he has and how fast he's going, it's like, I don't know if anyone can stop him. It's like, it's not even about the speed necessarily. It's like, if you did catch him, what exactly is your game plan for a lot of these guys? Especially, it's like, you see some like ACC cornerback. It's like, buddy, go take a breather. It's the play's over. It's not going to happen for you. And I think there's some great value in a guy who is just so strong and can still break off home run hits. I mean, you put him on an offensive line that can give him even a little bit of anything, and he can turn it into a lot. He can get the absolute most out of it. I feel like I'm almost kind of underselling him. This just sounds like a guy. Well, it sounds like just a guy, right? On some level, but really it's the overall strength that he has and is more than that. And his burst is more than that. He gets to the line very quickly as well.
That shows up in his 40 time too, by the way. His burst off that line was crazy.
Yeah, he's very, very fast. So it's almost like he can simultaneously do what needs to be done to like be very good at generating just straight up positive plays, like to have a high success rate. While also doing that, he can break off the home run hits very easily. It's all one thing for him. So while he doesn't break outside as much, I'm not always mad at that. Now, there are some times where it's like, dude, like you can do more here. You could be more creative. And I agree. Maybe he really like, it's not quite in him because he rounds corners in a way that maybe you don't.
When you see him plant off one foot and and really try to make a sudden cut, it's just not as explosive as it is for other guys in this class. Not even close. Like,
not when he's trying to cut at a huge degree, but I do think,
sharp angle. Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of his cuts are within a more limited range, and his vision is good enough so where he can kind of cut early and know what he's doing early to the point where he doesn't lose any speed. His game like synergizes very well off itself, and I think while his weaknesses sound bad, like if I were to tell you the average prospect, like it just all comes together for him well. If I'm being honest, I have a comp for him in terms of who he is stylistically. I may have brought this up in the group chat. He's not as good, but I just could not help but be reminded of Ezekiel Elliott while watching him, truthfully and honestly. Down to both of them, like being they have like this very upright upper half. Hampton's a very upright player. And Ezekiel Elliott, I think, was more elusive on the outside, but he also really liked to bang things inside. He also had that ridiculous contact balance and then was able to play through it and like finish off these plays with more speed than you'd expect. And then they both are like wearing their jerseys the same way. I don't think it's an exact 1-to-1 and don't crush me for it. But like I totally think with how they just like their posture, I feel like I see some similarities. So I like Hampton a lot. He is my number 2 running back, but I'm also comparing him to Zeke wearing a Buckeye hat.
He's He is nice. He also has such good footwork in a tight area. It's not like he's this big clumsy guy who just runs straight ahead all the time. Like they run so much power at North Carolina, right? So he's following his pulling guard, right? He's following him. There's a will linebacker like scraping over the top. That's the guy a lot of times he has to make miss, and kind of in the junk with half the offensive line kind of blocking down, and maybe the mic filling on one side and then there's that will on the other, like in kind of that tight space. He just like taps the ground with his feet and can really, get skinnier than you'd expect for such a big guy in those tight spaces. And him running between the tackles it's a very scary sight. And then no one falls forward in this class like him. I mean, it's ridiculous the hits he can just slide right off of. He caught a check down in one of the games I watched, and just like he got down and sat in a chair, right, and then just started like walking backwards.
Was it like it was like a hitch?
Yeah,
it wasn't. He was like, maybe, I don't know, was this him or somebody else? But I swear to God, he caught a hitch, and then like somebody was flying down to come and like tackle him, and he had his back turned to him, and then he just like still somehow was able to like push back and win that and spin out. He didn't get much farther because somebody else came to come and tackle him eventually, but it was crazy that he was able to get out of that.
I think we're talking about the same play. It was versus NC State, and it was definitely a hitch, and versus some red team, and like it took 3 guys.
Yep, that's exactly the play
to bring him down. Yeah, he's got so much leg drive, so much power behind his pads. There are 2 players outside of Jeanty that I like more than him, though. But he's my 4. But I do really like him. Like, I do like him a lot.
Well, I know one of them is Damien Martinez because you posted a clip of him, and then I looked at his weight, and it was higher than Hampton's, and I'm like, it's over. Hampton bros, we lost.
It is Martinez. Martinez, so he doesn't have the speed of
no,
Hampton.
He doesn't.
And he doesn't hit home runs like the other guys do.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
But he's also the most consistent running back in this draft class. Like, statistically, I looked. There's on Sports Info Solutions, there's boom plays and bust plays. And when you look at the ratio between them, Martinez is actually the best, even though he doesn't have a lot of boom plays, because he never gets tackled for loss. And I value that consistency because in one of the analytics books I read, the Football Outsiders Almanac, they said, we value consistency more than boom or bust running backs. And I've always kept that in the back of my mind where it's like, that's good to know. Like, that's kind of the optimal style.
He's an odd duck as well. I like him. I wasn't trying to get on you. I like him as well. He will like sit behind the offensive line and he'll stay patient. And then if nothing happens, like let's say nothing comes up, he's always down to just start like
burrowing,
churning. He'll just start churning forward, and it works great.
Yeah.
I think he has great strength. I think it manifests itself in a different way than Jeanty and Hampton as well. He's more of like the driving, mauling, just like churning. I don't know, whatever you want to say. I can't think of any more good adjectives for it.
5 people are around him, and he just still somehow kind of stays on his feet and keeps moving forward.
I was watching one play and I was like, okay, so he just got there and like his offensive lineman got behind him and pushed him and he went forward for like 7 yards. I'm like, okay, cool. But like, you know, that can kind of happen to any running back as long as they can stay up long enough. And then I went and I saw it from the other angle and I'm like, no, it was like kind of mostly just him doing the pushing there.
I feel like that happens all the time. Like, he just stays up long enough that a lot of times the running backs can stay up and help. Like, the pile gets pushed so often with him. And then I think he has the best patience, vision, and like setup ability in the whole draft. Maybe Jeanty, but then it's Martinez. Like, the work he does behind the line of scrimmage is ridiculous. Like, I mean, you know that Le'Veon Bell cut up where they hand it to him and he's just like straight up, just like walking. Martinez kind of has that. Like, he spends so long back there and he never gets tackled for loss. And I could see that being a negative, like, oh, he spends too long behind the line of scrimmage. I can see that being a negative, and it would be if he ever got tackled back there, but he doesn't. And he just finds these tiny creases, and he splits the smallest opening, and he does have the lateral agility that I think Hampton doesn't.
Now that I completely agree with. He does have.
He can really cut and move side to side with the power, with the weight. Now he doesn't have the speed, and he's not quite as powerful, I think. Like, he doesn't have the, it's not turned up to the level that it is with Hampton. But man,
because with Martinez, it's like, I see how like he can sort of prep himself and then drive forward for this big positive run. For Hampton, it's more like you don't even see this guy going 100% at you and you just still don't go down. Like, it's not quite the same thing. But I agree. I think Martinez's style works because he can be that patient and he can sit back there and he's great at making decisions. But like, even if it ends up being a bad call to wait and wait and wait, he still can get something good out of it so reliably because he's so good at pushing that pile that it works out really well for him. So I think he synergizes well too. I agree. I like him a lot.
Now, he's not as good at blocking as Hampton, and Hampton's not like the world's greatest, amazing blocker, but he's pretty good. Like, he's pretty good. And Martinez is just not, and that's a big part of a running back evaluation, and maybe Hampton just gets on the field faster because of that, and I should perhaps be taking it more into account. But just as a pure runner, I loved Martinez so much. I looked at his numbers versus Mark Fletcher, who's another good running back for Miami and got the ball a lot. But like, Martinez in the same situation picked up 6.3 yards per attempt as opposed to 5.4. He broke tackles 23.3% of the time, opposed to 14.3 for Fletcher. 4.4 yards after contact per attempt compared to 2.9 for Fletcher. And that mark for Martinez is the second highest in the nation after Jeanty. So he to me is someone who, yeah, he was really intriguing to me. And I feel like on Twitter, I see a lot of, like, I was searching his name and just looking at clips, and I feel like so many people love him, and they're like, this guy has such an insane blend of patience and power and lateral agility. He's my RB8. I'm like, I feel like he's
have the no. This is what I'm doing. Have the guts to have a guy higher than that. Yes. But here's the thing. Here's the issue that we've got. There's a lot of big fan bases with running backs that are ranked higher than that. You got to be honest about a few of these guys where it's like they're good, but I don't know if they've got, like, they're not quite as high. Like, I agree with you. It's tough.
I just and the speed is a thing. Like, he's not a home run hitter, and I understand putting that as a big weakness and wanting that.
It is.
So I can understand.
But guess what? But here's the problem. You're in
a pretty good 40 though.
A lot of these guys don't have like crazy home runs.
It's true. I would even say Hampton, as good as his 40 was, doesn't have like true home run speed. And there's a play against Wake Forest where he gets tackled by the safety.
I didn't watch that, and it didn't count.
Watch that one, and I'm like, okay, if he had and he's fast for his size. He's very fast. But he doesn't have that second gear that makes me say, like, whoa. I don't say whoa. Colin Cowherd, close your eyes and imagine Omarion. When Damien Martinez,
you killed it with that one, dude.
I see the patience. I see the vision. I see the lateral agility and the size.
So, Theo, is he your RB2 or RB3?
Oh, Martinez is 3 for me.
So who's your 2?
Henderson.
Yes! I'm letting you cook, Theo. He's my RB2 also. That's what I like to hear.
I'm going to give you the same stats comparison, Henderson versus Judkins, that I just gave Martinez versus Fletcher. Henderson, 7 yards per carry. Judkins, 5.5. Henderson, 21.5% missed tackle rate. Judkins, 17.6. Henderson, 3.8 yards per carry after contact. Judkins, 2.8. And Judkins is like maybe, he's a top 5 running back too, probably in the consensus. And Henderson is like lapping him in all these statistics. And he's got the home run speed that I'm looking for. He can make you miss in a variety of different ways. He's got the hurdles, like the jukes. He's got some power to him too as well. Showed up in big games against good defenses in a big way this year. I just thought like he kind of had the juice that I felt like a lot of guys in this class were kind of missing.
Yes, I completely agree. Go ahead, Matt. You're the big Buckeye here.
I like Henderson a lot as well. I don't think he's better than Hampton. But I think he absolutely does have the speed, and he's a guy who he's really like an elite blocker. You can tell out of college, which I feel like is super rare. I think that this season was easily his best for me. He took a really big step, and
he hasn't
that's
always
exciting
been
to me
good.
because
Matt's been on the Henderson train for a long time, though.
I've been saying I thought Henderson got better in 2023. I thought before then Henderson's been hyped for like a long time, and it took him a little while for it to like really come together. I think he hits home runs at a high rate. I totally agree with you about his elusiveness being high. A couple of things that I don't love about his game. I think that he's too east-west. I think he has a tendency to bout things outside too much and hunt for them. It's not like a game breaker. It's not like super bad, and it's gotten better. If you watch 2022, it was really bad, and it's gotten better, and I have faith that maybe it can continue to improve. But the other thing is that I really worry about his durability. Him being able to split carries in a major way with Judkins is something that helped him a lot, I think. And he's someone who's always been dealing with like nagging injuries while he's at OSU. I mean, I'm looking I know he missed time in 2022. He missed time in 2023. I mean, I don't think he's seen 200 carries or even 200 touches in a season yet.
No,
and
145. He only had 189 snaps this year.
189 snaps or 189 touches?
189 rushing snaps.
Snaps.
So he could have been on the field with Judkins and not gotten the ball.
Or Howard, more likely.
Or Howard,
and then like passing down. So I would bet that he had.
Let me just see how many snaps he had. Like total snaps.
189 snaps. That'd be like 3 games.
Yeah,
worth of snaps. It's got to be. He's split time.
This is elite podcasting.
Hold on, snaps by position.
There's no way he had 189 snaps.
Total snaps is 501. Total offensive snaps 490.
Fair enough.
Right.
But 145 carries. Yes.
And I also don't think he has like particularly elite contact balance or strength compared to these other guys. So I think that he could be a big play hitter for a good offense. And he's a guy who's going to be easy to get on the field. Anyone who's easy to play and can make big plays is really good. And anyone who does a lot of the little stuff well is really good. And any prospect who shows improvement on top of being a 5-star in college, which he significantly has, is going to be really good. But I don't think he'll ever have the strength that a guy like Hampton does. And I do worry about the durability when it comes to the position you probably got to be most concerned about durability with. So I like him. I honestly didn't come up with a set top 5, but he would definitely be in my top 5.
Yeah.
But I don't have him over. I wouldn't have him quite at top.
I mean, I think the reason that I have him over Hampton is kind of the same thing that Theo hit on, just like the explosiveness, the big play stuff is really important to me. The lateral quickness is kind of important to me as well. But I also think that, and this goes for both Henderson and Judkins, both the Ohio State guys, I think they're underrated in terms of how much power they have as well. Because they have plays where they're able to kind of take on contact and throw guys off of them. Judkins hits a couple really nice stiff arms. So I do think they're kind of underrated in that aspect as well. And Judkins is 6', 221. He's got a pretty big back. Henderson's 5'10", 210. Like, they're both pretty sizable backs. But yeah, Henderson being as explosive and as quick laterally as he is just insane. And like you said, the 7 yards per carry, I saw that when preparing for this episode, and I like jumped out of my seat. I'm like, dude, he's goated.
Yeah, and when Judkins only got 5.5, I think that just says a lot about him. And he's kind of a jack of all trades, maybe not master at none. Like, there's no one trait where I think like, well, he's going to go into the league and he's going to be the best. He's going to be the fastest. Oh, he's going to have the best vision. Oh, he's going to have, or even in the class, like maybe he doesn't have the best anything purely. But when you think about his blocking and what he is as a receiver and the fact he does have home run speed and pretty good vision and creativity and twitch and all of these things, I'm like, okay, after Jeanty, I just think like this is a back I know can be explosive for me and play all 3 downs. And that's why I put him at number 2, even over Hampton and Martinez, who I also love.
Yeah. Hampton would be my 3, though, probably.
That's fair. That's very fair.
So, Matt, would you say that Henderson would be your 3 then?
Probably not quite that high. I don't know. He's not. I think having him under Hampton is crazy, if I'm going to be completely honest with you.
Name one genius who isn't crazy, Matt.
Fair enough. I'm just like
quoting Kanye in 2020.
I'm quoting you at this point. Like I don't know.
Honestly, that's fair.
You said that every episode for a time.
I said that for a while, and then I decided that it might not be the best.
He's a little too damn crazy.
Yeah, I kind of forgot that's a Kanye quote. That really doesn't age well now that you know that.
Yeah, that's who I was always quoting was Kanye, but yeah, I can't anymore. So So Matt, who would be your next back if you had to take one after Hampton?
My next back, it gets a little fuzzy for me. I think a lot of these guys are close. I'm sorry I didn't come in with a better ranking with strong opinions about each of these guys.
How do you feel about,
how about
Judkins?
I'm not as high on Judkins.
I agree.
But he just had such a great day at the combine, Matt.
He did have a great day at the combine. I do like him. I think there's some aspects of his game that are really good, and I think he's going to be a good pro. He's got great burst. He hits the hole incredibly quickly, and I think his vision is really good. I think he does a good job of keeping things inside smartly and finding good creases. And on top of that, I totally agree. His big thing is his stiff arm, which I promise you I'm not only saying because of the one that he had in the national title. Like, he's constantly
he's
stiff arm.
Yeah, if you look up like Quinshon Judkins highlights, you're going to see
it's all stiff arms.
It's all stiff arms, man.
It's all stiff arms. But you know what I think is, like, if I'm just being honest, you know what I think is kind of fooling people? I feel like people are confusing him having a great stiff arm with him being like, him having like great like contact balance, I guess. I don't think he's like impossible to knock off his spot. And I also think like people kind of view him as, okay, he's sort of the yin to Henderson's yang. So he must be like the power back. And he is to some extent. But I don't think he's some like mauler or bruiser to the point where he would quite land on my top 5. It's not to say that he doesn't have strength to him, but when there's a lot of good backs, I don't think his strength stands out in any way. And I don't think he's as good in pass protection as Henderson. He does have good hands, so I think he can get on the field a lot, and that's why I do still like him. And he's one of those guys where I think, like, you know, some team's going to take him a little later and they'll be like, see, we waited for somebody who will still probably be a good solid back and we didn't spend that much. And that's a perfectly fine strategy in its own right. And I think they'll be happy. But I know some people have like the OSU backs at like 2 and 3, and I'm not quite as high on them as that.
And let me break out the calculator here for a second. 4 yards a carry versus Texas this year, 3.8 versus Michigan, 3.4 versus Tennessee, 2.9 versus Nebraska, 2.9 versus Purdue, 2.6 versus Indiana, 2.1 the loss versus Oregon. I just want like, you're playing Ohio State, man. Like, I want that number to be above 4 all the time, I think.
Yeah, and I think in college especially, like, backs that have yards per carry under 6, I start to raise my eyebrow a little bit when it comes to draft season. That being said, my hot take, if there is one to be had about Judkins, is that I think a lot of his hype stems from like him being broken in NCAA 25. Like, I'm so serious.
Totally...
Like when like that spin move was like totally broken. Like, I think a lot of people just like see that and they're like, yo, like, he's goated.
What's weird about that is, like, he's not that type of dude, like, at all. Like, that's not the type of player that he is, even a little bit. They really just said, we know this guy transferred to Ohio State and he's good, so we're just going to start giving him stuff. I don't want to come off as a hater. I don't. But, like, I'm not quite as high on him.
He's got the physicality that I like. Like, he really is physical, and he really brings a certain nastiness and punishment to a defense that I think can be valuable. But
I like him when he's attacking a defender, but I still don't think like he has like crazy. Like,
if he gets hit by us from the side or
like, like that type of stuff. Like, I don't think he's like any stronger than some of our other contenders here.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not.
Have you guys watched? You go ahead, Matt.
No, Theo.
Have you guys watched Rootin' Tootin'? His last name is just Tootin' from Virginia Tech at all? He just had a crazy combine as well. He's my 5 at the moment. He's pretty good. He had the best speed score at the combine this year, which is weight combined with 40 times. So you're not just overhyping
How
a
fast
100
did he run?
He ran a 4.32 at over 200 pounds.
Damn fast. That's crazy.
Yes. And he is somebody, and that speed shows up on tape, and he's just smooth with it. Like on these zone runs, when it's time for him to cut back, he just is, again, his feet are just barely touching the ground. He's able to change direction so easily and just kind of glide, and he just powers through these arm tackles. He's kind of low to the ground. He's small. He's definitely small, but again, that doesn't really matter for me. And I think his, he's got this blend of skills and this kind of high-end athleticism that I think showed at the combine that made me think like, okay, this guy's got a little something to him. I kind of like these small little zony, cut backy, like contact balancey guys with the home run speed. I was like, I can work with this. I can work with this.
Well, you know who we got to talk about?
Oh, Scatabo.
Your guy, ASU legend. What do you think of him?
I don't think he's an NFL starter.
Thank you. Jesus. I'm glad I don't have to go crazy on this episode.
And he's such a superhero, and he's so tough. And I obviously I love him. He carried ASU. Mm-hmm. But he's kind of small in a way that I don't love. Because he's not really built out through his lower body, I feel like, as tough as he is to bring down. And he just doesn't really fly through the hole with the speed that I'd like to see. I just don't think he's gonna be that difficult to bring down in the NFL. I really just don't think he's got the tools to break the tackles that he needs to break. And I also think he's a bit east and west, more east and west than you'd expect. And he's just not quite. He could be a dog as a role player and a running back, and I think he can still bring a lot of delight to any team that drafts him. But I just don't see him as this, Michael Turner or whoever you want to comp him to. Mm-hmm. I just don't see him doing what he did at ASU in the league. I just don't think he has those tools.
Yeah, I think there's some lack of speed there in a more serious way than maybe some of our other guys who just lack the long speed. He almost lacks medium speed. And I agree his burst is really not that crazy. And he does try to create a lot for somebody with his skill set. I disagree about his contact balance or his strength not translating.
He does bounce off everything. That is his he refuses to go down. He can get his body in such weird positions and stay he can put his hand on the ground and his waist can be 90 degrees, and he just has this will and want to that is extremely rare for and this body control that's extremely rare for a running back. So he does have some things, and statistically I think he's the second best running back in college football.
He puts up
and I don't think that's by mistake entirely, even if he is a little wonky at times. I think the strength in his overall game still kind of rounds out pretty decently. Now, you should be lower on him maybe if he does try to create too much at the NFL level. I want to see him be a little bit just more decisive sometimes, or just honestly bang between the tackles all the time, which I feel is going to be his thing more so. But he also has great hands. I think I can get behind him maybe never turning into some sort of bell cow at the NFL level, because if you're not hitting home runs, it's tough for me to want to give you the ball 300 times. That I can get. But I think between his receiving prowess and the change of pace he could bring if you have another lighter back or somebody faster there, or just as a short yardage guy, I think that there's a pretty easy role for him. And I do think it seems like there's too many people who are overcorrecting because they know he's kind of slow and he's hyped up, and they're I can kind of be low on this guy and that'll be my take. And it's all just playoff hype. I don't think it's quite that. I think there's more to him than that.
He's got some special skills. He's just not you'd think that you could look at his production and say like, oh, this is a great prospect. And he's not a great prospect. But the thing is, like, backup running back is a very important role. And I think like a high-end RB2 can be what he is. And there's a lot of guys like that who are, important for teams and fantasy teams. And like, think about, I don't know, Jaylen Warren in like Pittsburgh or who's another
right. And like, here's the thing: if Jaylen Warren was somebody's starter, like, would you be like, that can't possibly be? You're a disaster. Like, there's teams that are starting running backs who like suck way worse than. I don't think it's impossible for him to find like a very serious role. Yeah, and I think if you watched his tape, but he wasn't so statistically accomplished and popular, I think a lot more people would be like high on him from like a low spot. And now that he's at a high spot, people are sort of low on him. But really, he's a good prospect.
Yeah, he's not bad, but he's not what the numbers suggest, I think. But that's fair.
Well, I think it's interesting because he's got a ton of yards and he breaks a ton of tackles and he's like top 5 in rushes of 10 plus yards. But then you look at rushes of 15 or more yards and he's like near the bottom of like breakaway rate and all that. Like he's barely in the top 50 of breakaway rate.
Right. There's a lot of guys where it's like their long speed's bad. This run only went for 35 yards. With Skedbo, it's like his middle speed is bad. This run only went for 12 yards. It's rough. And maybe that does just keep it like, I don't know, maybe it's tough to start a guy who's that limited.
That's
speed-wise. We'll have to see how it plays
because like you talk about Warren, I'm like, dude, Warren is like super explosive, tons of long speed.
If we're talking about there being a million running backs, and it's like, okay, we're kind of looking for guys where it's like, what can they bring to the team? I just think, I'm thinking about the things that he can do rather than the things that he can't. Once we start to get into day 3 talks,
he can also catch pretty good too, and he runs like wildcat. Like he's just a survivor. Like honestly,
if we're talking Matt, if we're talking day 3. I'm all in. Yeah, that's no problem.
I don't know what his consensus rank is.
I haven't heard anybody talk about him, I feel like.
Well, he didn't run the 40.
And there's no point in it. I mean, that'd be the Michael Bush shit. he'd be like 491. Who was that? There was some Texas back who ran like something, maybe not in the 4.9s, but like in the 4.8s not that long ago, who was kind of hyped, but I can't remember.
I mean, Estime ran a 4.7 at the combine and then went to his pro day and ran like a 4.5 something, like a 4.57 or a 4.58 or something. But like everyone saw that 4.7 and they were like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah, so there's no point in him of running, but honestly, him not running. I mean, we all already know. But I don't hate him. I'm on his side, and that catch that he had against Texas, where he was tracking the ball down the sideline and like fought through some contact to catch it. I don't know if he ever did something quite like that again, but I was like, that was ridiculous, man. Like that was there's plenty of receivers in the NFL draft who do not put that on tape, who just cannot get that down. And there's some receivers in the NFL who can't get that down.
One of them
I don't know if he
Chargers.
can do it consistently. And yeah, it's not easy. So I think there's enough there for him to be in the NFL. There's certainly like way less interesting backs on depth charts or whatever. So I'm a fan.
What was Matt Asiata's 40 time? That's the slowest back I can ever remember watching.
I don't know.
4.77.
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad.
He was a starter for the Vikings after Adrian Peterson got suspended for his abuse thing.
Hey,
was he?
He was. I don't know.
The rule needs to be...
I'm trying to look up the.
Theo, what was your 40 when we ran at the draft? Because you were sub 5 still.
I was sub 5. I think I was in the 4.7s.
I thought you were like a high 4.7. That's why I'm like, if you're running
4.6,
slower than
4.7. Yeah.
We got to find that video now because that's what I'm
not convinced that you ran a 4.3 though. So I
did not run a 4.3. No, it was a 4.49 was what I ran.
Oh, you ran a 4.49? Do you think that's legit? Do you think that's actually the 40
I
that
couldn't
you
run that. I don't know. I couldn't run that now. There's no way. I am not. But like, it's possible that. But like, also, I was.
How do they
socks,
time the start? Yeah, you were in socks, and it's like, how do they time the start? I don't think I actually run a 4.6 or anything like that.
But like, it's on the go, right? So I assume the clock starts when they say go. So if anything, it would be like later.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe you ran a 4.3. That is one of the great mysteries. Is there is on camera. We did run pretty good 40s, but I have no idea if that's legit or not. Like, but where can you get it better timed than the NFL Combine experience?
That's what I'm saying. They had that at the Super Bowl also, and I thought about running, and then I was like, I don't want to ruin the
don't ruin the luster. Just stand on your 4.4. We were faster than the two other guys that ran. So
we were substantially faster than the two other guys that ran.
So maybe we are faster than the average Joe. I'm faster than. I was pretty fast. Like.
You were moving, man.
I'm faster than I.
It's even if it's just like a flat 5, that's honestly respectable.
I think that's very respectable. It would be bad if it were. I think when you start getting into like the 5 to 6 range is when it's like, okay.
Rich Eisen always runs around a 6, and I'm always like, yeah, that's about how fast like just a regular guy is, right?
Oh yeah.
And he's a little older, so it's like if you're a little younger, it probably should skew a little faster. So if you're listening and you don't have a quicker 40 the time than that, you need to get in the lab and get to work. Frankly.
Okay.
Some resistance
Theo,
training.
I found the video.
You need to have a better 40 time, bro.
Theo, I found the video. You ran a 4.82.
Oh, that's not that great. 4.6.
That's still pretty good. No, that's still pretty
fine.
good.
That's
man.
good. Anything sub 5 is good.
Yeah, man.
I think I can run a sub 5. I do think I can run a sub 5. So yeah, that makes sense.
I'm looking at like the slowest times by position each year. I'm seeing Devin Funches at a 4.7. I'm getting mad, man. Not many of these dudes have the drafted label next to them. Funches. Here's the thing. I'm looking at all of these guys, right?
Yeah.
And they have each position. Funches might be the highest drafted of like any of these guys who are on any of these lists.
The slowest 40-yard dash ever is an Arizona State guy, Regis Crawford, who ran a 6.05 as a. It doesn't even say his position. Like what on mock draftable. It just said he was in the 2004 draft class. I mean, I bet I can guess his position, but it doesn't say it on here.
Yeah. What was his height and weight?
He was 6'2", 316.
Okay, so like a defensive tackle.
Yeah, probably. What's the first name that I recognize?
Is crazy.
Did you guys watch DJ Giddens?
No.
By any chance?
The K-State guy?
Yeah.
I did not get to him.
I only caught a game of him, so I don't want to like go too far, but
yeah,
I thought he looked really, really good. I know he tested well today. Not that I care, but he is incredibly practically elusive.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of guys that can make these big cuts, but then they just slow themselves down so much to do it that it's like you got one extra yard, but you can't really string that next to anything. Like that's your big final play. I feel like I'm always doing that in Madden. I can juke the final guy out for 1 yard before somebody else comes and gets me, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Giddens, it's not like that at all. I posted one of his plays where I was like, dude, he just is, in between the tackles, does a good job slipping through, and then can get from one side of a guy to the other and then start running that way, like use the momentum of that cut to start breaking it outside and then set up another dude and cut out and then broke outside. Like, I'm like, he might change directions like 8-9 times and do it in a pretty reasonable way while not just like killing to try to make something happen when there wasn't anything there, just trying to kill to make something happen, and like got lucky because he was able to like bend around the outside or something, right? I was like pretty impressed by that. And then I thought that he had some moments where I'm like, they're not bringing him down that easily. I thought like that must be paired with him just being sort of like a feather here, but it didn't seem to be the case. Now, was Colorado's defense, which I don't think is incredibly trustworthy as like the only benchmark. But I thought, I guess we judge players off of much worse defenses. I don't know where they actually ranked last year, but I thought he was pretty good. I don't think he was much of a blocker from what I saw, but I'm very interested in him. I think he could really be something there. He had some juice for sure.
Let's see, what are his stats looking like? And I can judge him off the box score. So, let's see. Of the little list I put together of some prospects, and I saw you tweet the play, so I threw it in here because I thought he might come up. He does have the worst EPA per attempt of my list. That includes Judkins, Smith,
K-State's offense, bro.
Hampton, Sampson, Tootin, Scatabo, Jeanty, Henderson, and Martinez. Oh. And he has the second lowest positive play rate. But those are just stats. And stats lie all the time.
We don't know why that is. We don't know what that is. I mean, how good was Kansas State last year? I don't rightfully know.
They were perfect.
Tootin is low on stats, and I like him a decent amount. So,
okay.
We can be together.
Lying.
But I will say, when you watch a second game, you may want to keep in mind.
Keep in mind his success rate.
Keep in mind his success rate and say why is it so low? Because it isn't. He's not standing out statistically, but.
Very valid. There's two other guys that we absolutely have to talk about. We're not going to get to everybody, and running back is one of those positions where like the depth of it is always interesting, and we have to talk about Caleb Johnson.
Yes, we do. That guy has some breakaway speed, I fear. But I also wonder if he is just a product of a really great offensive line.
I wasn't in love with his contact bounce, and I didn't watch much of him. I just feel like he had way too many plays where he just kind of ran into a wall and stopped, and just, I don't know. Matt, you talk about him. I feel like I haven't watched enough, but I wasn't really moved to watch more, and I moved on to watching more Martinez.
I think he's a guy who has pretty solid burst. I thought him and frankly the other guy that we need to talk about is Dylan Sampson, for the record. I thought that those guys were sort of in the same mold to me, where I thought they were very well balanced and they made it work off of good vision, but there's a fair number of their plays where it's like they're kind of just taking what's there. And I don't know if they have like some like crazy maybe moves that they pull out of their bag or some crazy like contact balance that makes me think like, okay, here's specifically what he's going to do at the next level. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad, and maybe I'm underestimating their nuance. I don't know where they ranked in terms of success rate, but it felt like both those guys were usually pretty good at making the right decision, and I think there is good value in that. And it's possible that I'm looking at that stuff and like I'm overestimating what's easier to see, which is like this guy got hit and didn't go down versus this guy read out this play correctly. I think that totally can happen. Even if you know it, you can still do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't know if I'm quite to the level where I'm like, they don't have NFL level contact bounce. Like, I don't want to group them entirely together. I'm mostly talking about Caleb Johnson here. Yeah. Like, he had that 170-yard run. I forget who it was against, but he must have broke like 4 tackles on that. And I didn't think like they were quite exactly what maybe we would be talking about with like what Scatabo would do or Hampton would do. But I thought Caleb Johnson had like a little bit of everything, but maybe no one thing that I thought was so strong that it made him stand out. That was my takeaway.
I've got to watch more of these two guys. I wasted we're recording this podcast a day early on Saturday instead of Sunday, for the record. Yeah. And I wasted one of the days between here and the last podcast watching and really watching Tet and Luther Burden and deciding which one I liked more. So I'm a little bit behind on these backs. I don't have.
We got to decide what position group we're watching. Like the day, like 15 minutes from now.
So yeah, that's a good point. So sorry to our listeners out there.
I'm a little bit in the same boat. I maybe a little bit more than you, Theo, but I probably need to watch more of Johnson, Matt. But yeah, my thing was kind of in a little bit of the same vein where I'm just like, is he like elite at anything? And it just doesn't feel like it. I saw a lot of plays where I'm just like, I felt like you said, he just kind of takes what the offensive line gives him, and maybe that does just come down to vision. But it's just like I just see like a giant gaping hole, and like he kind of breaks like a weak arm tackle, and I'm like, maybe that gets charted as a missed tackle forced. But I'm like, is it anything crazy? Not really.
I think what might be part of what's happening there is that I think he can sometimes like make minor cuts or change his direction sort of so suddenly in minor ways where it's like he's not going to go take that guy head on. He's instead going to like force the arm tackle, if you know what I mean. And I think with Samson, because we're running kind of late here, I think with Samson, like obviously with Tennessee, they run kind of a funky offense and it's very spread out, right? And he's going to be facing a lot of times where it's like best case scenario, it's like him and a linebacker one-on-one for everything. And I thought a lot of times he could like sort of just like get around and burn the angle. But again, I didn't feel like he had one key trait that stood out to me other than like he has more than enough burst and he's got some contacts balance there. I don't think quite as much as Caleb Johnson personally. Where I'm like, all right, I can see him like with the vision and the NFL athleticism to cut it and be a solid back. And maybe I'm underestimating again, like the nuance of how he's reading things out. But it felt like it was a lot of times like, you know, the RPO stuff is simplified. It is dumbed down. And I think that extends not only to the quarterback, but to the running back sometimes. So I would say I'm higher on Johnson than Samson. They're both good backs, but
I would agree with
I don't think they like necessarily like way separate themselves from some of these other guys that are like consistently lower than them. I'm not saying it's not unfair to have them above them, but I think it's
who are you seeing
at the worst maybe a bigger tier
below them right now?
I don't know, like a bunch of the guys that we've talked about today. Sometimes I feel like I see Samson and Johnson as like two of the more highly ranked backs.
Okay. There's a lot of once you get past Hampton, and I feel like Hampton is the consensus too, and obviously Jeanty is the consensus one. And after that, it's all hell breaks loose, essentially. I mean, I think
it's all preference after Jeanty. I can get putting Hampton at 2.
I agree. I think Jeanty, I think there's a lot up for interpretation after Jeanty. I don't think Hampton has to be the consensus 2 whatsoever, but
up to interpret. I just watched a movie recently that was kind of left a little bit up to interpretation.
Oh, wow.
At the end. Mulholland Drive, David Lynch movie.
I love David Lynch, dude.
I've never seen it.
I had never seen it either. That was my first David Lynch movie, and I was like, that was very, very weird, very insane. So shout out. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I watched Blue Velvet the other day, and that was so fire. That was so good. That was so good. But I'm going to go play catch at the park, so.
All right. I'm going to go finish writing my album. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Stay Hot. We will let us know what position you want us to talk about, and maybe that'll be the one
receiver
we pick for the next step. All right, good choice, Matt. We'll do receiver since Theo's already watching Tet and Burden, and that'll be what we talk about next week. So until then, and until our next episode, once again, thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, we will catch you on the Flippity Flop.